Good morning. It's Thursday, August 4th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. Good to see you guys already checking in the comments. Scroll over there. This is the Western Standard's daily live show for you guys, maybe on for the first time. We do this every day on weekdays, aside from those long weekends when I hide out and escape. I have guests, I have ranting, and we have commentary. Like I said, I like to always remind everybody, use that comment scroll. I like seeing the comments on there. Keeps the discussion alive. It's the reason we do things live. Talk with each other, send comments my way. I won't necessarily read them all out, but I do read them all. And also, of course, try to keep it a little civil. I've seen a few bad fights break out on there. It is the internet, I know. No matter what we do in a discussion forum, even if it's about kittens, people are going to break out in a fight at one point or another, but we can try and keep it to a minimum. So as people are starting to check in, good to see someone from Nova Scotia, Louisa out there, and Judy out in BC, and Lucy in Cochrane. We've got people across this entire country, and I love that. It's good to see it out there. So let's talk about the daily observations and, the observances, I should say, I guess. And this, I'll reference something from the East Coast a little in this in a moment. So, for starters, it is India Pale Ale Beer Day, or IPA Day. And it's a certain kind of beer. For the real ones are bitter and very strong. There's they call Keith's IPA as well, but it's not. It's like a lager. But it just reminds me back in the 90s when we were just starting to get a variety of beer out here because we used to have government control of the liquor stores. Let's always thank Ralph. Every day we should thank Ralph, even though I don't drink anymore, for having privatized the liquor stores so we can get a good variety. And I had a roommate who was from the East Coast who was going on and on for weeks. Oh, we can get Keats now. Oh, it's great. We can get Keats in Alberta. And I thought, well, I'm going to surprise this guy. I'm going to find one of these liquor stores and pick up this Keats. And I'm looking and looking, and I never could find it. Finally, he comes home with a dozen of them one day. Keith's, Keiths, Keiths. Okay, now I get it. But yeah, so I was looking in vain. I was looking for Keats. Got to take those accents into account at time. Either way, IPA, it's the thing that every craft brewery puts out there. They always got to come up with the most bitter IPA, something that'll tie your tongue into a knot the moment you sip on it. And boy, if you overindulge, you really don't want to get sick with one of those. But still, some people really like their IPAs. Today is the day to celebrate them, and that's where you really get a good hoppy, bitter beer. Okay, it's also, here's an older person's observation. It's Raisin Bran Day. The classic old Raisin Bran. I hate to admit, maybe it's a sign of my age. I actually quite like snacking on Raisin Bran in the evenings. It's an easy thing to throw together. Get your raisins, get your roughage. Just don't eat too much of it, of course, so you could have consequences later, especially if you're on a show where you got to sit live for an hour and a half. You don't want to get the gears turning too fast and furious when you got to try and keep control for that long. But if you're into Raisin Bran, this is the day to observe it. All right, a couple of guests on today as usual. We got Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud. She wrote a column for us recently on Tamara Lich and Trudeau's record in general on strong women. He's not very keen on them typically. As well, we're going to talk a little bit about the fertilizer bans and what Alberta Proud's talking about there. And then Catherine Christensen of Valor Law. They've launched a class action suit on behalf of Canadian Armed Forces members and how they've been, some of the stories on it. Linda Slobodian spoke with Ms. Christensen before, did a great article and column on it. It's amazing what they did to bully and pressure our armed forces members with the vaccine mandate. It was more than just offering to fire them for not getting vaccinated. They abused them. Something else. So that's going to be a good conversation. She'll be on in a bit as well. All right, let's see what's got me going today. Somebody was saying, what am I ranting about today? Well, I'll tell you, of course. And that is developing Arctic Oil Resources Canada. We can ease the energy crisis, reduce Putin's power, and help ensure Arctic sovereignty with one simple action. We can get this trifecta. Canada needs, though, to get serious in developing its northern oil and gas reserves. We've been aware of vast oil and gas reserves in the northern region since the 50s. Hundreds of wells have already been drilled up there since the 60s, and reams of seismic data have been acquired. It's estimated there's 19.8 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and nearly 2 billion barrels of oil sitting in the Northern Territories. And aside from some production in northern wells in the Liard region, these resources have been sitting untouched. The reserve estimates likely are going to grow greatly if exploration and development actually start resuming again because we have better technology for exploration and extraction. While energy companies invested billions in good faith in Canada trying to develop those reserves, government interference since the 1970s, beginning with the Berger Commission, prevented them from getting any return on their investment. Attempts to get a pipeline from Inuvik to Alberta have been stunted and delayed so long the cost estimates exploded, and companies bailed out of the endeavor once the pipeline was actually finally approved a few years ago. Just not worth it because the government ruined it. The entire world right now is in the grips of an energy crisis. Increases in the cost of living and inflation due to government borrowing and spending, it's harming citizens in every developed nation on earth. Meanwhile, Putin is rubbing the noses of Western leaders into their own impotence as he continues his war in Ukraine and funds it with energy sold to European nations dependent upon Russians' resources. How humiliating it must feel for the president of Germany to condemn Russian actions in his most strongest of terms while groveling to Russia at the same time to ensure it doesn't cut off the gas shipments. Biden claims to support human rights and green energy, but it kind of rings hollow as he goes cap in hand, begging for more oil from countries with some of the worst human rights and environmental records on the planet. Meanwhile, Canada's sitting on top of some of the most abundant oil and gas resources in the world and can't bring itself to develop it. We've got that moron Trudeau sitting there trying to shut it in. Even if Canada suddenly found the will to expand oil and gas production, it will take some years for the product to come on stream. That said, there's no better time, though, than the present to get on it. Demand for oil and gas isn't going away for decades. Only the most blinded of environmental ideologues can see that by now. Even if it takes a few years for new projects to come into production, we can rest assured hungry world markets will happily purchase the products. The Mackenzie Valley Pipeline's been studied and consulted to death. All that needs to happen right now at this point is for the government to get out of the damn way. There's no need for further delays. Not only will developing northern resources bring much needed oil and gas to the world market, but it will solidify Canada's claims upon the Arctic. Right now, Canada doesn't even have the ability to reach most of the Arctic due to a lack of nuclear submarines or icebreakers. When I worked on the Beaufort Sea in the Arctic, we lent space in our camp to government scientists because they didn't have the resources to go as far north as we did with the energy companies. A leader such as Putin would have a very valid case to make in snatching Canadian Arctic resources. How can we pretend to own them when we can't reach them and we won't develop them? What would we do about it even if Russian exploration began? And what case could we make to the world defending ourselves? The Mackenzie Valley Pipeline project would also come with an all-season road to Inuvik from the south. Currently, only the Dempster Highway reaches that far north, and while it's scenic, it's constantly closed, and it's a long and winding drive. A new road from Yellowknife to Inuvik would be a boon for northern communities living in isolation and unable to develop local resources due to lack of access. Now, Russia just recently announced their plans to extend their Arctic oil and gas development. And let's not pretend that Putin will think twice before extending that development into the ostensibly Canadian portion of the Arctic if given a chance. Canada's northern resources are sitting in a use it or lose it situation. And under our current government, we might be poised to lose it. That's what's got me going today, guys. I mean, when I read about the Russia moving along and expanding their Arctic exploration resources, and I just reminded of how stupid it is. I worked up there for years. There's like another Alberta sitting in the Mackenzie Delta area, and we aren't doing a damn thing with it. Meanwhile, the world is screaming for oil and gas. It's just absurd and ridiculous. And yeah, I wouldn't put it beyond Russia to just, hey, guys, if you aren't going to take it, we will. All right. Let's check into the newsroom with Mr. Dave Naylor. He's got his camera issues sorted out. He's more of a technical Luddite than myself, thankfully, so I'm not the lone one out there on the floor. How's it going, Dave?
It's going well, Cory. You ever get tired of making common sense?
No, I don't.
Good for you. Well, I want to thank our neighbors in BC today for sending all that smoke to us overnight. It made for a really pleasant drive in today, and it's actually kind of cooled the temperatures off a little bit, so thank you, BC. We'll take your smoke anytime.
It gives a more campfire sort of feeling anyways. We can't get out of the office to get out and enjoy the outdoors, but we can smell it and sort of feel that as if we were out by the side of a fire.
Exactly, and then your clothes all smell when you get home. So, yeah, it's all good. Speaking of all good, Cory, that's what we've got on our website at the moment. Lots of good content. Leading off with our senior political correspondent, Linda Slodian. She takes a look at the UCP leadership race and why Danielle Smith seems to be the unbowed, uncowed frontrunner. What she's doing right, what she's doing wrong. Our Linda has a take on that. Our military affairs columnist, Dave Makachuk's got a very interesting take on the tensions over Taiwan at the moment. You remember Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, visited there, and the Chinese got very upset about it, and they've been flying all sorts of airplanes and ships and missiles around expressing their anger. And Dave says, don't worry about China. They're just a paper tiger, and they're just playing war games. Nothing to see here. Our Ottawa columnist, David Creighton, has got a piece talking to Jerry Ritz, the former Tory agriculture minister, and he's not very happy with what the current ones and Prime Minister Trudeau are doing to Canadian farmers. Defense Minister Anita Anand has announced this morning that a couple of hundred soldiers from CFB Edmonton will be off to the United Kingdom this week, and they're going to take part in a project with other soldiers from the UK and New Zealand to train Ukrainian soldiers. And they get a 5-week intense course and on the rigors of battle and what to do, and then they're shipped off back home to go and face Russia. And our Mel Risden has got a story on testimony has revealed that Health Canada bureaucrats did not recommend a travel COVID vaccination plan. So I guess the question is, where does it come from, Cory? Answer: politicians. We've got a story on the CTF, our friend Franco Terrazzano, on the Liberals spending 40 grand on office furniture for a couple of embassies around the world. Our real estate reporter, Mike Thomas, has got a look at the Vancouver and Toronto markets, housing markets, and the fact that they're cooling off. And our Edmonton correspondent, Arthur Green, he's working on an interesting story, Cory, that during that Monday hailstorm, the largest ever hailstone ever recorded in Canada was discovered. And it's quite an amazing little piece of frozen ice, and just be glad it didn't hit your head or hit your vehicle, because both would be a total write-up. So that's what's coming this afternoon.
Right on. Yeah, that's an unimaginable sized hailstone, some of those ones that came down up there. And if they beamed somebody, yeah, it would be pretty serious.
I'm amazed nobody was killed in the storm. We had some dramatic video that's still on the website, Cory, of a couple of motorists pulled over just south of Red Deer. And I mean, it's like their vehicle was in an artillery firing range. Just sounded like gunshots hitting the car and smashing windows and bursting through the windshield. It's just unimaginably terrifying.
No, crazy stuff. Just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep, stay off the highways when the hails are coming.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I'll check in with you again after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
And that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as always, lots and lots of stories on the go out there. And as he's saying, lots of reporters out there working, bringing more out. Get on there to westernstandard.news after watching the show, of course, because I got many important things to say before you start reading all that stuff. I wouldn't want you to miss out on all that, would I? But get on there and check out those stories. And the reason we're putting out so many stories, the reason we got reporters across this country, is because thousands of you guys have been subscribing, and we really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, get on there, guys. westernstandard.news/membership. It's only $10 a month. It's $99 a year. This is cheaper than you used to pay for a newspaper subscription. I mean, some people spend that much a month on their subscriptions for video games or porn sites. I mean, I know these are important things to other individuals, and hey, it's your business, your hand. But all the same, if you can spare that, you can spare $10 a month to get good, independent news that doesn't rely on any government funding, and you're helping us along. We appreciate it. All right, let's see some of that stuff going on out there. Yeah, it was a good discussion, and we're going to have Lindsay Wilson in coming pretty soon from Alberta Proud to talk. And one of the things she also wanted to speak of was some of the insane plans that the government has on cutting fertilizer in this country. It's nuts. I mean, everything else is going through the roof. Costs, personal security, whether it's energy, food. I mean, these are necessities. And this government just keeps coming at it and coming at it and coming at it. It's frightening. And Jerry Ritz was a former ag minister with the Harper government. You know, he's a Saskatchewan farmer. He knows what it's about. And he had an interview with our David Creighton, and it was very, very good. He wrote a column on it, and he's got a link to the video interview he did as well. So, check that out a little later. I mean, this is getting, word from the horse's mouth. When you get an agricultural minister who knows what they're actually talking about, and he is furious and, of course, raising the alarm bells. And who shouldn't? I mean, this is our food, people. And we are threatening it. It's ridiculous and it's insane. But that's the trend that just continues along with this country. I mean, we can't seem to embrace common sense. Dave mentioned it earlier. I was looking at a story earlier too with there's a fella He works as a nurse in an ICU unit in Croatia, and he wants to move to Canada, or he did. And in this story, he spent the last 2 years trying to find work as a nurse in Ontario. Every one of our hospitals is screaming, our urgent care centers. It's not just Alberta, even though every socialist politician across the country blames their local government for it. Every province has healthcare system problems. The system is collapsing. It's not working. We've spent more money. We increased spending in every province across this country, yet the system isn't working. It's because it's a bloated, bureaucratic mess. And throwing more money at it just adds to the bloat. We need to crush the system and rebuild it. And, little tweaks won't work. And this guy said, you know what? I've had it. 2 years of trying to get in Ontario and bring my skills there as an ICU nurse. I'm done with you guys. I don't want to do this. There's way too much crap and bureaucracy. He's going to be moving to Texas and enjoying life as a nurse down there and providing his services out there. This is the sort of reason why we have a crumbling health system. It's not lack of money, guys. It's a system that's broken and inefficient and inflexible, and it's driving the staff out of the country. I mean, it's a competitive market. It's also nicer down in Texas. Better Mexican food, too. So I don't blame the guy for heading that way. But either way, when's reality going to come in, guys? We listen to Notley having a tantrum, as she constantly does lately, about the closure of an urgent care center in Calgary, and she would fix it. How? Oh, by hiring loads and loads more people. Well, where are they going to come from, Rachel? Where's the money going to come from? They don't think that far ahead because they refuse to accept that it's the system that's the problem, not the lack of money. But again, that comes to that big union word that makes the knackers of every politician shrivel back up into their belly as soon as it gets brought up. Conservative or liberal, they're terrified of taking on public service unions. And until they do, we're not going to see many positive changes coming around. There's a lack of collective courage. Okay, I've pissed and moaned, ranted enough. Let's talk to my first guest of the day, Lindsay Wilson. Hey, welcome back to the studio today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Cory. Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess, I kind of framed that a bit earlier. Based on the column you'd written and you submitted with us, it's there on the Western Standard Online, with Trudeau and Tamara Lich, and just Trudeau's kind of trend on how he deals with strong, outspoken women.
Yeah, it certainly is a trend for our Prime Minister. So through Alberta Proud, we're a grassroots nonprofit organization, and we advocate for everyday Albertans. We advocate for our energy sector, our resources, small businesses, farmers, ranchers, and we take issue with celebrities and politicians who get in the way of our prosperity and our way of life, which is pretty much happens to be just about everything that our Prime Minister does these days. So I wrote this column last week, and we took a strong stance. Our organization took a really strong stance on the trucker convoy and in support of Tamara Lich. Whether you agree with everything that took place, largely it was a very peaceful nationwide rally to stand up for personal freedoms and liberties. I think we've all been a little bit on the same page with that. Yeah. And I mean, how she has been treated is worse than how a drug kingpin has been treated. So it's really quite incredible that it took a month to get a 49-year-old grandmother from Medicine Hat out of jail. So we took a really big stand on that, and we're hoping for a positive end for Lich. She's just another name on Trudeau's long list of women, strong women, and he just seems to cut them down. Whether it's Jody Wilson-Raybould or Jane Philpott, the list keeps growing.
Well, as you'd mentioned, it seems, again, who knows, it's speculation, but there's few men seems more insecure with strong women than self-declared feminists, actually. They always talk big, but when they actually deal with a strong, outspoken woman, they tend to lash out or deal poorly with it.
I generally find it insulting when men call themselves feminist, and that's used as such a dirty word anyways, but the irony is not lost on any of us, I think, that he brags about being a feminist, and yet this is how he treats women.
Yeah, well, he also brags about caring about the citizenry and our, cost of living and the little guy, though he's never actually been the little guy economically in his life, yet he's doing, I'll kind of segue into the next topic, everything he possibly can to raise our cost of living and pressure our integral industries. That's something you wanted to talk about today as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I like my props.
Yes.
And so my oldest daughter, she helped me out with this. This is her summer project here. So we are asking you guys to say no to Trudeau's farm fertilizer reductions. So this is moving ahead where it's part of the the liberal globalist agenda to reduce fertilizers in their efforts to reduce nitrogen output, nitrogen emissions by 30% by 2030. This is their whole goal to get to net zero over the next 3 decades. The problem is it's absolutely ludicrous because the problems that are going to come out of this, and I mean, we're all watching the news. We're seeing how the Dutch farmers and what's happening in Europe, tractors blockading highways because there's going to be food shortages. We're not going to be able to feed the world with these goals. The Trudeau government is saying that this isn't against farmers, but that is absolutely not true. This is completely targeting the West. It's targeting Alberta, Saskatchewan. It's targeting our farmers because the only way for them to reduce these nitrogen output, emission outputs, is to reduce their use of fertilizers. Fertilizer is plant food. If you reduce that, you get a smaller crop yield. So the impact is upwards of $50 billion on our farmers. According to the Canadian Wheat Growers Association, just to give it, bring it back home a little bit more, for the average farmer who farms 1,000 acres of canola and 1,000 acres of wheat, the average annual impact will be about $40,000 out of these individuals' pockets. So it's ludicrous, and we're going to see what's happening in Europe is going to start happening here. And we just can't let this continue. We are the 5th largest exporter of food in the world. We're going to have global food shortages, and we need to be there to feed the world. And here we are with this ridiculousness.
Yes, and it's not a done deal yet. That's the reason we really got to speak up on this right now. I mean, it's proposed, it's planned, it's what he wants to do. We know that this government can never come up with anything aside from either taxing things or banning things, but they haven't said how they're going to reduce this yet. We just kind of know. But I mean, now there's still a chance to make people aware of this, to push back, write your letters. I know it seems hopeless, but
But it's not hopeless.
No, well, that's it.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so we're asking everybody to push back against this. Share content on social media. We have a ton of it through the Canada Strong and Proud network. Alberta Proud is a part of that. We have reach of millions of people, namely through Facebook. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the socials. And we're just asking you to share that content, share those news articles out there. There's share stories on TikTok. We have a TikTok channel as well. And stand with our farmers because this is ridiculous. I mean, we've got such pressures on food banks. We've got 50% of Canadians saying that they can't put food on the table. We have 1 in 4 Canadians who are skipping meals right now. So the thought that by doing this and by impacting our ability to produce food is going to just drive prices at the grocery store up even more. And we can't afford it. I can't afford it. None of us can afford it.
Well, that's it. And it goes beyond just pressuring farmers. I mean, we feel for our farmers. They're an integral industry in Canada. They're part of what built this nation, particularly the West, which is no coincidence, which is why you target them. I mean, if this was primarily targeting Quebec, we know it wouldn't be happening. And, we're not going to see a maple tax coming along anytime soon, I'm certain. But when it comes to cereal farming, and that's predominantly where this nitrogen fertilizer tends to be used or nitrogen's generated, then it's not an issue. But reminding consumers that it's not just the farmers. Once the farmers get hit, we get hit because they have to pass the price along. And our food staples, not luxuries, are going to go up.
Absolutely. And all of this was done without any proper consultation with the players in the industry. And so they are all rightly up in arms about this, and we need to stand with them. You guys may have remembered last month, we stood really strong on proud of our Alberta beef, and we ran an back off our beef campaign, and we were part of that growing loud voices that stood up to Trudeau, and now they have rescinded that for now, and that was the whole spectacle about putting these ridiculous warning labels on our beef to deter people from eating it, to suggest that lean ground beef isn't a healthy food. I guess it's not as healthy as insects are, or whatever they want us to be eating in their global agenda. So just like that, we want you guys to reach out to us, be all over social media about it, share those articles, share your stories, stand with our farmers, and get loud and get Alberta proud about it.
Yeah, and that was a good point, because the Health Canada, I think it was, or which it was going to put a warning label on ground beef. It was just absurd and ridiculous. But once the public stood up, and that's what I like to remind people, it's not impossible. It feels impossible, but you know what? Sometimes they do realize, oh, wow, we pushed it too far, and they will back off. And I think there's very much potential with this. I mean, even though somehow people in Toronto quite often won't seem to realize what powers their vehicles or heats their homes, so they'll still oppose energy, everybody eats. And when they see that cost hit them in the wallet, they're going to get concerned no matter what part of the country they're in. So if we could just let enough Canadians know, get up and stand up. This can stop.
Absolutely. In fact, this plan does not help the UN's goal to end world hunger by 2030.
Well, yeah, the UN's goals are a little hard to make sense
But if that's
of.
what does it for you, just remember that.
Yeah,
So,
the UN's here to save the world, except they want them to freeze and starve in the dark
yeah.
as we shut down all the oil and gas and food supplies for them. But like you said, that's another bizarre thing. I mean, we put tax dollars towards cricket farms. Like, and you see the articles from the usual legacy media outlets. CNN keeps talking. I mean, what was a recent one on cockroach milk? There's this fascination with making humans consume insects that's been coming out on the mainstream media and the left lately, and I don't get it.
Yeah, I really don't get it either. I mean, the truth is that Trudeau is no friends of he's no friend of Canadians. He is a friend to his global agenda, the global elitists, and I think they just want this big homogenized society, and we're all feasting on insects. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, he keeps taking these stands. He and his environment minister, we call him Uneven Stephen Guilbeault. They just have these ludicrous plans, and it's always targeting the West, and it's always like they continue to go after our best in the world Canadian energy, our Alberta energy, and now they've gone after our best in the world beef. They're going after our best in the world farmers. So,
but giving us crickets. So, I mean, and I guess because they say, oh, well, in Mexico, they were consuming, insects for 1,000 years. But, every society on Earth where they traditionally consume insects, it was usually a matter of need, not preference. I mean, sure, survival food, get out there, eat those bugs if you're on the verge of death. But if anybody could choose, even in those countries, okay, steak, crickets. They're going to go for the steak every time. Bear Grylls would consume his own urine as a survival tactic. Okay, but you know what? If you've got water, you'll pick that first.
Well, yeah, my life is not an episode of Survivor. I mean, with 3 kids, some days it does feel like it, but last I checked, it wasn't. So I'll take the steak any day. Thanks.
Well, that's something. And 3 kids, or even just people living on their own, if it's seniors on a fixed income, food costs are a big part of your budget, and they're important. And there's part of the problem too when you're talking about the world elites. So, right, like Justin Trudeau, he's never had to worry about a grocery bill his entire life. I said on Twitter the other day, he just feels that magical food fairies will fill his cupboards so his chef can get in there and pull it out and make him meals and bring him to his table, and his maid will clean it all up. He doesn't understand what these policies do to normal people. He's disconnected altogether.
Well, he's disconnected, just like he's disconnected from how much it costs to traipse around the world, right? I mean, he went through more jet fuel last month and enough fuel to power another truck or convoy. So maybe we should ask him if that's a fair trade-off.
Yeah, that was Tristan Hopper who calculated, and it was Brian Passafume who came up with that story, just looking into the numbers and realizing, like, holy crap, Justin spent only 11 days not flying in July. And all of his trips were all vanity trips. They were all photo ops. There was nothing critical. There was no summit or, important thing he had to go to.
He's not advocating for our energy industry or for anything to do with our own prosperity, on these trips, right? Where is he now? Where is he on his vacation?
Yeah, he's in Costa Rica. And I was cursing about that the other day because, I mean, we spent, I think it was $11 million renovating Harrington, mansion. I like to call it. Cottage makes it sound small, guys. It's a mansion. He gets for free on a lake with security and a few acres, but apparently it's still not good enough for him. He's going to fly to Costa Rica and hang around with the family over there.
Absolutely. Hope he's having a great time.
Oh,
on our dime.
God. And we got to pay for the separate rooms for him and Sophie and everything. I mean, it's just not an efficient trip all around.
Yeah, sounds like a convoluted situation.
But it does get frustrating. I mean, and if you want to get consumers to do things, I mean, you just walk the talk, right? I mean, you're telling us to tighten our belts, telling us to take shorter vacations or stay closer to home. And here's this clown, as you said, in 1 month, burning more fossil fuels than the entire truckers convoy did.
Yeah, I know. I love that because it just really puts it all in a nutshell.
Oh, and it's insane. And it shows too, we can't escape the consumption of petrochemicals. I mean, even if he wants to virtue signal, I'm sure if he could find a wind up elastic plane that was reliable and he could get across the sea with it, he would use it, but you can't because they don't exist. I mean, that's what a lot of this problem keeps coming to as well. Get rid of the fertilizers. I know there's no alternative, but we'll just get rid of it. We'll deal with how we're going to, deal with it afterwards, and get rid of petrochemicals, and we'll worry about how we're going to fill that void later, even if solar and wind and other alternatives are failing. It's a lack of foresight.
Well, we call them unreliable alternatives for a reason. We have best in the world energy. and through carbon tech and taking CO2 right out of the air and turning it into usable everyday stuff and things, like we can win that race to net zero right through our own energy right here. And, through the war in Ukraine and everything that's happening right now, I mean, Canada needs to become the engine of the world. We need to be able to fuel the world. The demand for energy is only going up, not down. So, this guy's just constantly taking us, we constantly are moving one step forward and two steps backwards. So,
well, and it also shows you can't appease the ideologues in this government. I mean, the energy industry has done a lot. They have, carbon sequestering, separating, fine, sticking it in a hole somewhere, or ways to convert it. I've spoken to Colin Craig about how they've even made carbon-based vodkas. They've reduced emissions. They've done all sorts of stuff. Do they get credit? No, they just get more and more pressure to keep reducing production. Likewise, with the farmers, I mean, they have reduced fertilizer use just for economic realities. Fertilizer is expensive. Quick McDick, I don't know if you saw his video on it. He's fantastic, that guy, and he's a farmer and he knows, look, we have done things, there's different ways of bringing in field peas to bring nitrogen back into the soil and other ways. But are they getting credit? No, because the government still wants them to cut further from what they've already done. You can't win. You've got to fight back. You won't win by appeasing these guys.
Yeah, and this our provincial government has, had enough foresight to invest in agriculture and in agri-tech, and that's what we need to do. We need to invest in it, not move away from it. So there's a lot of innovation going on, and there's a lot of opportunity, and there's just a lot happening right here in Alberta. But we just have a prime minister who clearly hates the West, clearly hates Alberta.
That he does, and of course he doesn't think much of those darn farmers, because rural areas don't tend to vote Liberal that often either. I mean, there's a bit of a rural-urban thing going on here too. Because to be fair, there are a lot of agricultural producers in the Maritimes and throughout Quebec and Ontario that these fertilizer proposed bans, it's going to hurt them too. I mean, it's going to hit the West the most because that's where most of our agricultural production is, but it's going to harm people across this country.
It's going to harm the whole country, and it's certainly going to hurt all of us when we go to the grocery store and it's $12 for a loaf of bread, and you're put on rations like they are in other countries.
Yeah,
and that can happen.
Maybe there's a way. You see, one of the areas though I see that Trudeau's terrified of is the dairy cartels. So if we can remind them that feed is going to go up because hay's not going to grow as efficiently without fertilizer, and once the dairy cartels speak up, it's amazing how fast the Liberals move.
It really is amazing how fast it moves, and yeah, they're not going to want to have to put down all their livestock, right? If there's no way to feed those cows.
Yeah, well, we'll keep pushing. But as I said, I'm just looking at alternatives and appreciate what you guys are doing with Alberta Proud, because if we don't speak up, if we don't push back, we won't win. And as you rightly pointed out, on the ridiculous little thing with labeling beef products and with this fertilizer thing, we can move the needle on this. The government, right now, it's still in idea balloon stage. We can stop this in its tracks.
Yeah, we do these kind of campaigns all the time, and like I said, like our social medias, we have reach of millions every week. We have email lists, and we get out there. We run petitions, all sorts of things. So check us out. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on all the social media platforms. And while you're at it, we put up a post yesterday just asking everybody to kind of make a comment on new T-shirts, new designs that we're coming out with. So I'd love to see you guys vote and plug something in the comments there, on which there's 5 of them we're tossing around right now. So please take a moment and vote on that.
Great. Before I let you go then, just to remind everybody, where can we find information about Alberta Proud and what you guys do?
albertaproud.org. We've got shop.albertaproud.org is our merch store. We're moving. We still have these. So if you want to back off our beef campaign, we're still going with that, because they quieted down on that for now, but it also ties in really well with back off our farmers. And so these ones are available for sale, and there's lots of there on our website. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Telegram, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. I think all of them. So TikTok, all of them.
Look up Alberta Proud. You'll be found out there somewhere. I know Facebook's kind of your most active area where you have.
It is, and I encourage people to DM me if you have any ideas, any advocacy, any things you feel that we're not talking about enough. This is all for you guys, so I want to hear from you.
Great. Well, thanks for coming in to talk to us today, Lindsay, and thank the kids for putting together the great props this time around.
Absolutely.
We can have fun with advocacy at times.
Yes, just a last reminder to say no to Trudeau's farm fertilizer reductions. Stand up for farmers.
Well, thanks again, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
You bet. Thanks as always.
See you, Lindsay. So yes, that's Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud, and as she said, just start Googling that, and you can find their presence all over on social media and a lot of the work they're doing. I mean, the name says it all. And it's not just Alberta, it's the West. These issues are big, they're encompassing. And this is the way we can do it. This is the way we can push back. We've got a lot of politicians who are always putting their finger to the air on where public sentiment sits. It's not a matter of common sense sometimes. It's a matter of saving their jobs. If they think the public needle has moved, the politicians will move, and they can. That's something, as much as I'm crabby on this show all the time, and I rage and I rant, I do like to maintain a bit of optimism. I mean, if there was absolutely no hope of changing things, then there isn't much point in having a show and discussing these issues. But things can and will change. If we bring it up, if we push back, we can make it better. I mean, otherwise we might as well just curl up at home and give up. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people kind of are. Apathy, it's one of our biggest enemies, guys. It really is. So check them out, get up there and start pushing back. Now, yes, so there we go. Anita saying, one of the commenters, keep writing, emailing, keep in their faces. Absolutely. It just never seems like enough sometimes, but it really does make a difference. And, as if we're quiet, they win. All right. Speaking of having, I'm going to talk about one of our sponsors. And these guys, are you get tired of constantly basically having causes shoved down your throat by companies that you don't care for their causes, but you buy their products and find out you've sort of indirectly donated to something you didn't want to? Well, Resistance Coffee is here for you now. Resistance Coffee Company. These guys are great. And this way you can enjoy a good product. It's local, of course. It's Western Canadian. Excellent coffee. It really is good. And knowledge that your money's not going to any causes you don't like. In fact, 10% of every purchase from Resistance Coffee goes towards organizations fighting for constitutional freedoms, like the JCCF and a number of other ones. You can find them on resistancecoffee.com. You'll see where these guys are donating 10% of your purchases towards that. So you can drink your coffee, enjoy it, and know that you're actually helping good causes while you're at it. And they give you high-end beans. It's a Canadian company. And if you go as well to resistancecoffee.com/triggered, you'll get another 10% off on your purchase as well. They'll deliver it right to your door. Here we go. Yes, Jet Gorgon says she ordered Black Gold Tiggy Sing roasted in Alberta. I think they're in Saskatchewan, actually. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I should look that up. That's the thing when you get these online things, you don't necessarily look at even the location. I know they're Western Canadian. And Tiggy Sing would love a dark roast decaf. Yeah, they do have a decaf called Empty Promises. I don't think it's dark roast though, but it's still actually a good flavorful decaf. And their medium roast is fantastic. I think that was the defund the CBC. And hey, they got lots of merch and other stuff as well, like this cup. It's Resistance Coffee and Liberal Tears. So, I can drink the coffee and flavor them with a few Liberal Tears. And I like to think I cause Liberal Tears as often as possible. So check them out, resistancecoffee.com/triggered. And as Rock Girl there said, yeah, buy Canadian. We can't grow the coffee here in Canada, but we can roast it and mix it and sell it and distribute it. And that's what these guys do. All right. Let's get through some more news here. And this segment, yes, I was speaking healthcare. Here's an interesting one. Elizabeth May, it sounds like she's running for the leader of the Green Party again. Politics are crazy. And it's good to see the Green Party and Elizabeth May out there to show that it's not just the right that does crazy partisan things as, conservative parties rip themselves apart and infight and tear their leaders out. Elizabeth May, who stepped back as leader, allowed new leader to be elected, and then basically worked on the sidelines and undercut the new leader until she was pushed from office, and now is going to run for the old job all over again. And so, this is apparently according to the Red Star anyhow. And she also is saying she's proposing, though, to share responsibilities with a co-leader. And I forget who it was who tweeted that out. But it was a great tweet saying, oh, look at how Liz wants to do this. She wants the title of leader and perhaps the salary of leader, but then she can have a co-leader who will actually have to do all the dirty work and hard stuff. And that way Liz can get the best of both. And there is no mechanism, of course, that allows for co-leaders of parties in our system. It's not made for that. But, it's their party. I guess they could do whatever the hell they want with it. Typically they only have one or three tops in the House of Commons. But yeah, Liz keeps things nice and crazy and interesting anyways, and goes to show the rationality of our typical green leadership out there. I saw a tweet recently too. Apparently Alberta has a Green Party as well. They ran a few people in the last election. So, good for them. Hey, that's democracy. That's the way to go. I just didn't even realize they were there. I mean, talk about swimming upstream. Running in a Green Party in Alberta has got to be a really good time these days. Here's an interesting story I saw out there. Public vulgarity is not considered a crime. The Newfoundland and Labrador Court of Appeal ruled this. I guess some St. John's motorist drove by a TV reporter and yelled something obscene out the window at them, and he was charged with disturbing the peace. The courts have decided, no, that's not against the law. It's kind of a laughable story, but at the same time, I don't think it should be criminal to use vulgarities, but at the same time, I don't think you should, it's low class and nasty to shout them out in public or make a lot of racket as well. But it's like so many other areas. I don't want the law to intervene. I would hope society can. Just as better people, we don't do it. I mean, I worked in the oil field for 20 years. I can tell some jokes that would make a trucker blush. There's no language that offends me. And there's some language, over beers back when I used to drink with the other oil field guys that was nasty. But as you can see on here, I can get through many, many sentences without blasting out F-bombs or all sorts of other obscenities. There's sort of places and times for anything if you're going to use them. And I find one of the worst things is when you talk to a person, they can't seem to get through a sentence without dropping some sort of obscenity or another. You got to space them. I mean, use them by all means. I think they help make language colorful. If you use it creatively, you drop it in the right point in a conversation, and it's in private. I also don't like it when you're sitting at a restaurant or you're sitting somewhere in a public spot and you're listening to somebody just blasting away with the vulgar tongue. I mean, there's families with kids around and everything else. And again, it's not like the obscenities are going to directly hurt the children, but it's also teaching them that, yeah, you can speak in that sort of language as well. And it's just not healthy. It's not good. Again, it's no crime. I agree with the judge on that one, but it's also not a great thing to drive by screaming it out the window at people. And I know a lot of people have been getting on the mainstream media's case, and that was the thing a lot we're doing, was sneaking up behind and yelling things like that during live hits and things and frustrating them. But it's not, you can't, I'm not afraid of being juvenile and tasteless lots of times, but there's a time and a place. But that's the thing too. Watch yourselves, control yourselves. Don't give them an excuse to start criminalizing stuff like that. There's actually a little YouTube video I had fun with a few years ago, actually. That was way back when I ran for the Libertarian Party. And I had to make a delivery down in Tabor. I was working for an arborist company. I had to drop some equipment down there. And at that time, the municipality of Tabor had actually made a law against swearing. They tried to make a bylaw against swearing, and they were having trouble with youth. And Tabor's a strange community. If you want to look it up, they got some unusual people, a lot of farm labor that settles there because there's sugar beet in the area, and it's a huge industry, but it's very labor intensive, and they brought a lot of migrant labor in, and they have a large number of Mexican Mennonites there. And they've also got a large Mormon population there. And I think there's a lot of clashing between these social groups within this small city or large town. I'm not sure what they land at. And but either way, with the religious laws they came up with was this no swearing. So I pulled up and made a selfie video outside of the sign where it says, "Welcome to Tabor," screaming out "FU" at the top of my lungs. Though there was no other people around or anything else. Just making my point that, hey, you guys can't tell me what I can say or what I can't. But if I were running up and down the streets yelling that at people, you know what? I deserve to at least get some scorn from people. And as I said, it's low taste and not necessarily a good thing. And it's Soniko saying Tabor has corn, sugar beets, pumpkins, and the pheasant hunt out there. It's in the irrigation block. Like if people look into southeastern Alberta, it's actually a fascinating part of the province. If you haven't traveled much, within the province, have a look. It's got a lot of history. Things change. I mean, we see, most of Alberta in the south is rolling cereal crops, wheat fields, canola, things like that. But you get into the areas where they can irrigate in the south, and they grow all sorts of stuff. As you're saying, sugar beet, pumpkins. I remember when I was a surveyor's helper, a rodman, and I was riding a quad through a field that was over by southeast of Brooks, and they were growing carrots. I mean, I was surveying for 20 years. The worst, roughest field I ever rode in my life, I think I still got parts of my back that are sore from that from 30 years ago, was riding through a carrot field. But you never think of it. Where the hell do they grow carrots? Well, down in that part of Alberta, they do. The other thing that's neat down there, and it's kind of a dark part of Albertan history, is the Japanese-Canadian population down that way, down south of Brooks and out that way. When we interred Japanese Canadians and really screwed them, that's a part of Canadian history that's pretty shameful during World War II. They took them, they picked them up, they dumped them into these camps, took their possessions away, their property away. And that's why I like to never underestimate what a bad government can do to you. And but once the war was over, they basically opened the doors and said, oh, okay, sorry about that, guys. No harm, no foul. Here you go. You're free. So now you have all of these Japanese Canadians broke out in the middle of, essentially nowhere of that time, and just let loose. So they went to work at the nearest thing they could find. A lot of that was the sugar beet farms down that way. And they worked really hard, and they, became a part of the community. A lot of big farm owners down there. It's interesting when you go down, and I'd work as a surveyor, and you come up to a farmhouse, and there was a person clearly of Asian descent, but their English, of course, is perfect. They can't speak a word of Japanese anymore. They have, an Albertan accent. They're farmers like anyone else, but it's just something that's not usual for you. And in the communities, you go to the coffee shop and see the old farmers sitting around drinking coffee and bitching about their crops with each other. And a quarter of them are clearly of Asian descent, wearing their John Deere caps and talking about things like that. So, look around, check out Southeast Alberta sometime, all sorts of areas. It's things I like to point out and say, when I worked surveying, there's no boring part of the planet. There isn't. That's what I loved with my travel. If you look around, there's something interesting to be found and checked out no matter where you get, except for eastern New Mexico near the Texas border. I still couldn't find much of merit there unless you're really into tarantulas. That was an awful area to work. And I had a hard time finding anything aside from an old abandoned Air Force base that was kind of interesting. But still, if you look, there's neat stuff around. And as others are pointing out, yes, the Tabor corn is going to be coming out. Corn Fest is coming up in Tabor. That's the big crop that comes out of there. You see the pickup trucks and everybody's selling the Tabor corn. So speaking of supporting farmers and Alberta crops, grab your Tabor corn this year, and the farmers markets are on the roadsides and so on. All right, before I get to my next guest, let me go into one more subject. Yeah, so the federal archives are at serious risk. This is an interesting one. So, the Library and Archives of Canada, and that's a huge, an important resource, actually. But they'd stored material in obsolete tape cartridges. It was high tech for the time, but it's gone bad. And now they're trying to transfer to digital records, but it looks like there's been no planning, no coordination, confusion over the roles. Again, the government is not efficient with pretty much anything they do. You don't count on government efficiency. You're always going to be disappointed. That's why less government is typically better for whatever you want. I was looking at a Lead Now, and Lead Now is an organization that pushes left-wing causes all the time. They're a lobbying organization. They start petitions, things like that. And I see somebody was retweeting one of their things with one of their latest petitions. They're complaining about the Rogers outage and complaining about the lack of multiple providers of internet service in Canada and how vulnerable it makes Canadians. Okay, they were right kind of along the ways. But then their proposal was, we need to nationalize it and have a crown internet provider. Okay, if you want to take things from bad and make them worse, give it to the government. Think harder, you guys. We need more providers, not fewer. And we definitely don't need the government in on it. There is a problem. When you only have two options to pick from, it's pretty hard not to believe there's some degree of price collusion in service and things like that. So you need more options, but don't get government in it. You're trading one monopoly for another is not going to put you into a better position. So again, with these archives, unfortunately, the government has been inept and incompetent in managing these. And like I like to keep pointing out, they can't even pay themselves right. They've spent billions and billions on the Phoenix payroll system, and now they're talking about spending until 2032 to try and get it fixed. Their own payroll. They're incompetent, and they get bigger and bigger and cost us more and more. All right, enough about that subject for now. Let's get on to my guest here, and that is Catherine Christensen of Valor Law, and the class action suit they've had on behalf of members of the Canadian Armed Forces who chose not to be vaccinated. It sounds like there was quite the campaign to try and pressure our service members into vaccination, and a lot were pushed out of work. A lot went through a lot of stress. One was even considering suicide. So let's bring Catherine in and discuss what that's all about. I think I see her in the lobby there. Hello, Catherine. Are you out there? Looks like she may still be muted.
There we go. Here I am.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry if I might have caught you by surprise there, but
No, that's okay.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming in to join us today.
Yes.
And we had Linda Slobodian's article. She'd spoken to you a while on that, and it was just quite an eye opener. Just horrific treatment of our armed forces members, and I guess you're following up on that. Maybe if you could kind of explain in a nutshell what the suit's about.
Absolutely. So back in October, I was approached. My practice has always been with members of the Canadian Armed Forces or veterans. So in October last year, they approached me and told me that there was a mandate coming. Everything had been voluntary up to that point, and that there was a group who did not want to be vaccinated. Now, I've been watching the Canadian Armed Forces for a few years now on things that they've been doing to their own people that I call, in a nutshell, the abuse of power. And the vaccine mandate was an absolutely perfect example of that abuse of power. And what had me hesitating didn't last long once they started telling me the stories. And some of those stories were in Linda's article. There's a lot more of them. And I was appalled at what we were doing to our own people. And in fact, to this date, the mandate still exists. You are required to be vaccinated. They were going to get 100% vaccination no matter what it took. There's rumors that they're going to bring in a booster as mandatory. And if you go into any building inside the Canadian Armed Forces, you have to wear a mask still. So, there doesn't look like they're changing their mind. There was rumors that they were going to take back the mandate. I'm not seeing it. I think it's all smoke and mirrors.
Well, and something that was pretty appalling, like this was beyond what you would see, say, in the private sector even, or other government areas where they'd say, this is the mandate, get vaccinated, or we're going to release you without pay, or possibly even permanently fire you. There was harassment and shaming and a number of other issues going on to try and essentially really force and coerce people into taking a vaccination they didn't want.
It was truly a psychological operation. People were physically isolated, whether it was the infantry guys that were put into an unheated tent in December, or Navy guys who were forced into a room together every day, completely isolated. People that were told that before the mandate, they were working from home with no issues, doing their job. All of a sudden, they were told they weren't allowed to come near the base without their CO's permission to even use the gym, go to the medical facilities, do anything they needed to do. They had to get their commanding officer's permission before they could even come on the base. So the people in my group say they felt like they were, the unclean, completely discriminated against. And this is an armed forces that we have the Chief of Defense Staff going on the news and saying it's all inclusive and they want to welcome everybody, they'll accommodate everybody. I even have chaplains, Catholic priests who asked for a religious accommodation that were denied, saying that their belief wasn't sincere enough. I mean, I don't know how you get more sincere in your religion than being a priest, but that's what they were told. I had people denied religious accommodations for the wrong religion. They weren't even the religion they were denied on. Medical accommodations, people who had decided to take the first shot had a bad reaction, in some cases very serious reactions, and were still ordered to take the vaccination for the second time. And the harassment of our pregnant soldiers and air pilots, unbelievable. You would not believe what they did to these poor women.
Yeah, and I mean, you would think the forces have been dealing with a lot of difficulties as it is with treatment of women as they're trying to culturally adapt and change with our female members. Of all things, you'd think they'd be more responsive rather than shaming or humiliating or stressing. I believe one said they were brought to the brink of suicidal thoughts.
Yes, and then more than one. Thankfully, I have a really good team of people who, when we keep a close eye on our members in the lawsuit, and if we get any indication that there's mental health issues, we, get band together and we keep an eye on people. We get them help that they need. The mental toll on these people. It was the psych op was successful, I would say, in mentally torturing their own troops. I mean, I guess it was a good experiment on their part, but
yeah, I mean, if there's been any, I guess, mental pressures typically put on troops in training, is a long debatable thing on how they're treated. But usually it's
Mhm.
at least meant to unify the troops because it's so critically important in times of crisis or conflict that they're tight knit and they're together on things.
Mhm.
This sounds like it was much more of a divisive effort. I mean, not only, setting aside the damage being done to these poor members who were ashamed and isolated from others, but I imagine it hurts morale and unity within the forces as a whole.
Well, they already had a huge morale problem before last fall. Let's face it, the Canadian Armed Forces was having a really hard time keeping up morale. Then they bring this in, and as word started to spread, I mean, we have a small military. Doesn't take long for anything to spread through the ranks. And after what has happened, my feedback from people, even people who have fully vaccinated, had nothing to do with the lawsuit, the feedback I'm getting from them is that the morale has sunk to a low they never ever expected because they did not expect to be treated this way by their chief of defense staff. We have no faith in the ranks for the officers. People do not trust the officers. They don't trust their chain of command. And if you don't have trust in your chain of command, you don't have a military because you have to absolutely have tight knit trust between all the ranks and trades in order to execute anything in the military. We don't have it.
Well, that's another problem is trust has been shattered. And even if, as you said, it sounds questionable, even if the mandates are lifted and people did return to the forces, I mean, a lot of them at this point, I imagine, don't want to return to that environment. Or if they did, they wouldn't be feeling comfortable or in a trustworthy environment at this point.
They would not be, most do not want to come back, mainly because their confidentiality, their medical privacy was completely violated. And everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows their medical status, which should never have happened. Not just for general medical privacy rules, but under the CAF's own policies, you should never know medical information about another person. But here's the catch. The rumor was that if they lifted the mandate, they were going to allow people to return. But if you've been released under a 5F, which is a not suitable for further service, and in this case, the CDS has said you have a moral weakness if you chose not to have the vaccination shots. The only person who can allow you to come back in is the chief of defense staff, the same guy that is on the news calling these people terrible things, saying they have no honor, they have no morals, they have no ethics. Do you really think he's going to let these people come back? I don't think so.
I imagine there's going to be a lot of research and planning and things done, but I guess, was there any evidence that non-vaccinated people caused any harm or damage, I guess, while serving within the forces? Or, I mean, there should be proof of how dangerous these non-vaccinated people were, I would imagine, wouldn't there?
Well, let's put it this way. Not a single member of the Canadian Armed Forces died of COVID. And not the outbreaks that have happened, they tried to keep them really quiet. But as I said, it's a small military. Rumors and information travels. All of the outbreaks involved vaccinated members of the military, not unvaccinated. So
It just gets so
they
frustrating.
didn't cause any harm.
Yeah. I mean, we've had problems with our veterans and our military and how they're treated in Canada for decades. This is just sort of the latest thing. And I mean, people forget we're asking a heck of a lot of people. I mean, it's a calling rather than a trade, I would imagine. I mean, it's not a path to easy money. It's not an easy lifestyle. You have to really love what you're doing to want to do that. And as we shame and punish our members who've chosen to do that, it's just more of sort of a shameful on our part as Canadians.
It truly is. These people that have undergone this whole process, we're talking about very honorable people who have chests full of medals, which are not an easy thing to get in our military, people who have served for decades without a single mark on their record. They've never been in any trouble before. I would put my life on the line for any one of these people in my lawsuit, no questions asked. These are very honorable people, and they did not deserve what has happened to them since the mandate came in.
So at what stage is this action in right now then? I imagine you're still collecting other participants and gathering information, like is a statement of claim been filed? Or I don't understand how all of that necessarily works, to be honest.
Yeah, the statement of claim is ready, but we have to have a lot of our information ready to file within 30 days. There's just under 300 people in the lawsuit now. I have 70 more in the past week who have approached me. And as you can imagine, getting that much information from that many people takes some time. We're also lining up our experts to put in the claim. So we're clicking right along, but I do expect to file a statement of claim, hopefully by no later than the end of this year. And the other thing is that this lawsuit is being funded by crowdfunding. I am not being paid for this. It's being run through the Valor Legal Action Center. And so everybody is collecting donations because I didn't want someone to not participate because they couldn't afford it. I feel that it doesn't matter whether you're one of my light colonels or whether you're a private who hasn't been in very long but stood up for what you believed in. Should not be a reason. Money should not be a reason you can't participate. So that's the other thing to note, that this is a grassroots, if you will, application to say that Canadian Armed Forces cannot get away with treating their people in such a poor manner.
And these things take time. I mean, the members are already having a hard time. They've been pushed out of their jobs. And as you said, I mean, the filing might not come towards the end of the year. So it could be a couple of years before this is resolved, I imagine. It's going to take some resources and money.
Yes, it will. Yeah. But they're dedicated. They are a fantastic group of people. They're all pulling together and volunteering their time as well. And we're putting it together because they want to serve in the military that they actually signed up to serve, not the one that's actually exists at this time.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your work on this and then the ongoing work. So just to remind everybody then, where can they find information if they wanted to support this, or if perhaps there are other military members who need some help at this time?
If they go to valorlegalactioncenter.org, that's our website, and Valor has the U in it and a Canadian spelling, of course, and it has information on there on how to reach our office, or if you want to support the cause, there's information there as well. And we also have a Give Send Go account, which is on that website to link.
Okay, Give Send Go. Yeah, not everybody's too thrilled with GoFundMe these days, but that's a separate issue altogether.
It is. I was glad we hadn't set up a GoFundMe last fall with the truckers, because I'm sure we would have been targeted at the same time. So
yeah, well, that's fodder for other shows we've had.
It is.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on to talk to us about this today, and for the work you're doing. And well, I really hope that this gets resolved sooner rather than later. It's just appalling how we treat some of our people who trusted themselves to the armed forces like that.
Exactly. Thank you very much for having us on, and look forward to future results.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Catherine Christensen of Valor Law. And as you said, if you're looking that up, spell it. It's the Canadian spelling, VALOUR. And they are putting together that class action suit. And as she said, she specializes in military actions and things such as that to support our veterans and people within the forces still currently right now. And I mean, this has been going on for I don't know how long. I mean, this vaccination issue is a recent one, but our treatment of the military for veterans, for people suffering from PTSD, it just never seems to end. We ask so much of the people who serve, and then really just try to forget about them when they're done, and it's wrong. They're protecting us from a lot of things we're unwilling or incapable of protecting ourselves from. And they should be respected and treated as well as humanly possible for their service. That's why it's called service. It's if they wanted money, if they wanted an easy job, any of them could have pursued all sorts of other trades, and they chose the military. And they're working for us. That means that we should have some obligation to properly respect and take care of them. And it's as I said, it's one thing to see a place, and that's still debatable, imposing vaccine mandates, but taking them and shaming them and harassing them and separating them and putting them in cold tents. As I said, look up Linda Slobodian's column on it, some of the stuff that was done to these people. This is not a professional, respectful organization that's treating people correctly, and respecting them as they should be for what they're doing. And it's just not good. All right, let me talk about one of our sponsors before I get on to some more news items here, and that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. So speaking of individual rights, speaking of taking care of yourself, similar to with my first guest there, Lindsay. We've got battles going on. We're always having to battle this federal government, and we've always got to stand up for ourselves. And if we don't, we'll lose. If we don't, we'll lose. That's the guarantee. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association is standing up for you. And again, their name says it all, right? It's an association of people who enjoy shooting sports. It could be any sports, or even just not even so sporting, even a collector, whatever. If you enjoy firearms, if you're looking to enjoy firearms, you got to take out a membership with these guys for a couple of reasons. For one, there's a bunch of resources. As with any association, you can network with other firearm owners. There's links to events, to trade shows, things like that. They're all on the site. But again, and as always, most importantly of all, they are lobbying on your behalf. Tony Bernardo, who heads them up, always out front and center, speaking up for you, because we have a government that's working to take away your right and ability to have these firearms. And they get this buyback program, things like that. We got to push back or they will take your stuff. Buyback, I hate that. It's not a buyback. It's a theft where they give you some of your own money back to take it, because they're tax dollars, so it's still your money. And if you didn't give permission for them to take it, it's theft. I don't care how they want to phrase it. If I own something and they come up and they say, even give me $1 million for my old 22 in the basement, and I say no, and they still take it, it's theft, even if they overpaid me for it. You can't take it by force and claim that it's a buyback. They're taking it from you without your permission. So join the CSSA, guys. Take out a membership. Stand up for yourselves, because it's very, very important. Their website is cssa-cila.org. And help take control of your firearms. They're important for you. I see Melanie in the lobby there. If she's ready to roll, let's bring Melanie Risden in. She's been working on that ongoing series. It's been fantastic. And these videos keep coming out. And there's the Freedom Heroes series. There's another one coming up tonight, I believe. Right, Mel?
That's right. Yes, we've got one coming out tonight for our COVID Freedom Hero series, and it's part 4. This one is featuring Chris Scott, a name that is likely very well known throughout the province and likely throughout the country now. He is the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, and he was one of the sort of restaurant owners that drew his line in the sand early and did it in a very outspoken way, and opened up his establishment, even though public health orders had ordered restaurants to be closed and not to be serving people within the establishments. So he said he made that decision based on much of the science that was coming out and much of the some of the narrative that he was seeing sort of crumbling, and was really just fighting to keep his business alive. I mean, Chris bought the Whistle Stop Cafe in the summer of 2019. So we're talking, half a year from when the pandemic basically hit. And for many of these restaurant and business owners who were forced to close their doors, it was their livelihoods they were standing to lose. So Chris fought back, and he suffered many consequences, fines. He was even arrested during a protest at his establishment in May of 2021. But yeah, it was a very trying, difficult time for him, and we're going to talk to him, and that's going to be tonight, and we'll run down sort of the events that unfolded for him.
Great. And since we got you, not everybody's caught your series. Just to remind everybody, what were the first 3 about? Because they've been kind of dropping fast and furious now.
Yeah. So we have already featured, on Tuesday, we featured Pastor James Coates. He was one of the Alberta pastors whose church remained open. Again, followed all of the rules through the first wave, but things started to unravel for them in the second wave, and they decided they were going to open their doors for all of their congregants to come, even though restrictions had limited capacity to 15%. So Tuesday, we did interview Pastor James Coates from Grace Life Church. Before that, we did speak with Matt Sattler. He is an aviation professional. He is a pilot for one of Canada's major airlines. And he and a co-founder started Free to Fly, which was an advocacy group for other pilots and airline personnel, as well as tens of thousands of Canadian travelers. So we spoke with him about the travel restrictions and sort of what he and others went through. And then, goodness, before that, now I'm having a brain. Yeah, and then before that, sorry. Yeah, I'm having
Yeah, because there were 7 of them, and I'm trying to remember that first one as well.
yes, I
That's
know.
okay. And as for like I see Pamela Jones Kenny, one of our commenters, saying, "Are there replays for these?" And that's what we're saying. Yes, if you go to the Western Standard Rumble page or YouTube or Facebook, you can find those all in the video sections if you scroll down. And the Melanie produces them. They get released on evenings like tonight, sort of a big live event and affair when it comes out. But then it does stay up there for you to review later. And there it is, John Carpe. Of
Yes.
course, kicked it off from the Justice Center of Constitutional Freedoms. How we could forget. Sorry about that, John.
Yes, sorry about that, John. I know. I'm almost working ahead with the other parts of the series that are coming. So it was all kind of a bit of a blur for me. But yes, that was a very important one. The JCCF was huge and still is huge in representing, if not thousands of Canadians who are, pushing back against the mandates when it comes to their constitutional rights, the travel mandates, employers that were bringing in mandates and relieving people who were choosing to remain unvaccinated. So that was a huge one. And again, still there are some major court cases still at play with the JCCF and many other legal professionals across the country as well. So that was a big one. And we are also, going to be touching base on the weekend with some law enforcement personnel. Many of those officers, police, RCMP, that really questioned whether the orders they were being given were actually kind of contradicting the oaths that they took to serve and protect. So we're going to be talking with Brian Dennison, a former Calgary police officer, and a former RCMP officer, Constable Bulford. That's Daniel Bulford. And then we're also going to touch base with some medical professionals for another episode. And lastly, we will be highlighting Tamara Litch.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad you could come on to talk to us today and remind all these viewers, hey guys, tune in tonight and catch these right when they drop, because it's a fantastic series. And boy, you don't get stuff like this from the legacy media.
Well, that's true. And so 7 o'clock tonight is when you can catch our next episode. And we will certainly, like Cory said, they are available on all of our video platforms. You can also go to our website if you're a subscriber. And if you're not yet, we would really encourage you to subscribe because, like Cory just said, we are really digging into a lot of stories that legacy media aren't touching.
Great. Well, thank you for checking in with us on that today, Mel, and looking forward to the stories as they keep coming out.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cory.
All right, we'll talk later. That is the Western Standard's Melanie Risden. And yeah, I'll use that little bit of moment. She's right for self-promotion, guys. Visit our sponsors, buy some Resistance coffee, use that, Triggered, and take out a subscription. Because as we said, that the legacy media isn't digging into these stories. It isn't talking to these people, to these COVID heroes. They're not highlighting them. We're doing that. Melanie's doing that. She's working really hard on it. And these productions have been very well received. They're a great watch. And for us to keep doing that, to have Melanie still out there and other reporters digging into these issues and reporting on the stuff that the legacy media won't, it's only because of you guys. So thank you who have already subscribed. And if you haven't yet, get on there. This is how we can beat the legacy media. This is how we can beat the government stepping on your rights, through you guys maintaining our business so we can keep providing. It's a nice circular relationship we all have going on here, and it pays off for us all. If you haven't been to the Whistle Stop, as I see some people were talking about on there, it's a little cafe on the side of the highway up by Mirror. I've been there a couple of times now, and it's sort of, I guess I would put it an hour and some sort of east of Red Deer, and it's a nice classic little cafe. Convenience store. He's even got a little movie screen out there for outdoor movies they do and things like that, and a bandstand. I think he holds quite a few events there. And I went up there with Jane one time on the weekend, and we stopped at the whistle stop. Then I went farther north because they were pressuring, and there was a fellow with it's fox of some kind. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but he's in Bashaw, which is a town near there, and he had a Mexican restaurant. You wouldn't think of Mexican food in central Alberta like that and everything, but it was fantastic food there as well. And we went in and had a good meal there because he was defying the health orders at that time, and the police came by while we were there ridiculously. And so, yeah, get out there. We got to keep supporting these guys. As Melody pointed out, he hasn't run that place for terribly long. And I owned a pub for 5 years. I sold it just before the pandemic started. The new owners are still hanging in there. Boy, they've had a really tough time with it. And running the hospitality service industry, it is a tough business. It's narrow margin. It's high hours. You don't make a lot of money at it. It's a very difficult business. It's unforgiving if you have slow times. So support these guys who've pushed their way through this pandemic, because it's still not easy, even in good times. To have been able to make it through the pandemic is something else. I don't think I would have had the energy left in me if we'd still owned that pub when the pandemic hit. To be honest, we were making money before it hit, but not a lot, and I was tired right out. That's why we were selling. We just would have closed our doors. I don't think we would have had it in us, Jane and I, to weather that kind of storm. So, for all of those businesses that have survived this nightmare, just, when people talk about how high restaurant prices are and some of those things, well, you got to keep in mind, they really are. It's a narrow margin business. They're charging the minimum they can get away with while still making some money. The cost of inputs has gone up. Regulation is huge. Licensing is expensive. Taxes are expensive. They just can't serve you food at as low a price as they used to. So it's going to cost a bit. And I know people go out less often. They have to, because you got your own household budget to think about as well. But try and keep these businesses going. Public dining with our neighbors, with our friends, that's a part of society. It's important to us. That's why every culture in the entire world has restaurants, because it's a thing we do, whether it's families or friends or even coworkers. If we lose those, we lose another element of networking together, and we're all face down in our phones all the time instead. So, get out there, support your local guys. It's important. Let's see here, get through some more news as we get towards wrapping things up. This was an interesting one. A federal judge quashed an order granting 3 U.S. citizens from Michigan refugee status in Canada. This took 6 years on appeal. I'm glad this judge quashed it, because this was ridiculous. So what it was 3 U.S. citizens. It was a domestic dispute. It was a quarrel. She had grabbed her children and come to Canada and said she was fleeing her ex-husband, who she said was abusive. I don't know. That's when you get into these things. But she was facing charges in the States, of course, for child abduction. We're not here to harbor that. The Americans have adequate laws and to protect people in these family disputes. Or if they're inadequate, they're no better or worse than ours. Refugee status is for people fleeing countries that can't protect their rights, where they are truly unsafe. And perhaps she was unsafe, but if that issue, that's more between her and her husband and her family and her local laws to deal with that. The Americans, and this was saying, it is not a country that's reasonable for us to accept refugees from. I'm sorry. And we had some of those people whining, oh my God, Trump got elected. I got to come to Canada as a refugee. Oh, come on, get off it. Look at that. 4 years later, you managed to vote him out. Get over yourselves. Likewise I'm not going to go into the whole abortion debate, but if you need an abortion, there's still plenty of states that provide them. You don't need to cross the border. You will not be a refugee into this country in order to terminate the fruit of your activities. You can do that down there. And that's an abuse of what refugee status is, because I think it's great that we can take in refugees in Canada. There are a lot of countries that really do crack down horribly on women, gay people, all sorts of minorities, different religions, cultural groups, and they are fleeing real persecution. In fact, most of those people are coming from countries that Joe Biden wants to buy oil from. And we can happily take those people here and settle them in, and they make great citizens, and we've saved people from a bad part of the world. But the United States is not one of those countries, guys. Again, there's lots of imperfections in the United States, and we've seen our rights violated here in Canada with the pandemic and some of the things pressed on us with mandates and lockdowns and restrictions. But it's still not to the point of the types of countries. When we're talking about refugees, let's talk about refugees. Let's talk about countries where people's lives are immediately at threat, because that's what it's about. And this case was not a case of that. And the judge ruled the right way, but it took 6 years. 6 years. I mean, they pretty much were settled in by the time. And I feel for the children now. They spent 6 years in Canada. Now they are going to be deported back down there. Not an easy outcome. That should have been resolved a heck of a lot faster. Yeah, this is something. So, I mean, again, as I talked about, we're going to have the investigation coming into the imposition of the Emergencies Act against the Freedom Convoy last year. And I really hope that judge digs in, because all these little tidbits, as we get more and more facts, it just looks worse and worse and worse for this government. And that's all going to start on Labor Day. So like a month from now. And the latest one now, the Labor Department says days before the protests against the vaccine mandates, they're already saying we've got shortages of labor in the trucking industry. Like, they're telling the cabinet, we can't keep hindering truckers. It's harming supply chains. It's causing problems. Look how easily that dingleberry of a prime minister we have could have avoided all of the trouble last winter just by dropping the stupid mandate against truckers. And you know what? That vindictive little prick has still got those mandates going right now. Right now, truckers still have that mandate. That's how petty and little that man is as a prime minister. Mandates of all sorts are dropping all over the map. But he will keep that one on truckers. He'll keep it for 10 more years if he can stay in power that long. And this was showing the government knew this. They knew this before. If he'd have just dropped those bloody mandates, we could have gotten rid of the problems with their supply chains, ended the protests. I mean, there might have been still some people showing up to protest, but they're not going to have a heck of a lot of basis for it any longer, will they? Because that was the whole start of the whole thing. But nope, they knew what was going on, and they still pushed through with the mandates and still troubled and did this to us. So yes, I hope this follow-up, this inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act really is thorough and real. And it's going to be hard for any judge, even if he's a liberal one, to be able to overlook and rig something like that. I hope he's a judge who sticks to principles. There's a lot of them out there who want they take their job seriously. And let's hope that's the case, because we got a lot to learn, and we got to push back, and we've got to put this government in its place. Let's see. Here's another survey. More than a third of Canadians say they would completely wipe out their presence on the internet if they could. I found 36% of Canadians would delete themselves. 48% felt they were being used by companies that collected their data, and others were worried that their devices would be hacked. There are worries. It's difficult, but you got to watch what you're sharing. We got to remember, companies have been collecting information on us, though, since time immemorial. Like, if you ever had an Air Miles card, that's what the whole point of the thing was, even if it wasn't your phone and other things like that. The reason you're getting those discounts because they're tracking. That information is valuable. It's telling them a person of this age, at this income bracket, living in this area, tends to purchase these kinds of goods at these prices. Very, very valuable information. And they're mining that more than ever through Facebook now and everywhere else where we're sharing it. Nobody's reading the small print, and they're giving it out. We aren't going to get out of the internet. There's no way. It's a part of our life now. It's unavoidable. You can't wipe yourself out of it. All I can say is we just got to be careful. Sometimes take that moment to read the small print and stop installing those Facebook apps on your devices, guys. How many people end up hacked because they wanted to have something that made a goofy face of them? This is what you look like as a space alien, just to install this app. Guys, that's how they get you. That's the hackers. And then you're in sudden bigger problems. Actually, if you look up, there's another thing with what was it, the most hated man on the internet, that documentary on Netflix with this awful guy who ran that revenge porn site. He was just a nasty, nasty individual. Part of it was they were hacking people's things. And the very first step was hacking their Facebook account so they could send fake private messages, and people thought they were communicating with others. But the very first step, I don't like victim blaming, but what I'm saying, because lots of us make mistakes, you click the wrong button. Just be careful. And Facebook is one of those areas where you can get that foot in the door, and then they can find ways to sneak your email password. And once you get into email, there's all sorts of stuff. Here's something that kind of ties in on the story that I just read about food prices being out of control in the Arctic, and it kind of ties into my opening rant. Some people are talking about how expensive it is to get by in a Iqaluit right now. And here's some of the numbers. Like a 10-pound bag of potatoes is $15, $22 for a kilogram of ground beef. And a 4-liter jug of milk is $8. I remember that. I remember when I was in Inuvik, even buying Arctic char was like $70, which was kind of ironic. But in winter, the frozen foods, things like that, were very expensive. And areas like Iqaluit, they're not going to get a road access to that town anytime soon. But as I was talking about, if we develop the north, bring more resources up, that cost of living will come down for the people living up there. Because as it is right now, The number one employer in all of the North is the government. I mean, the bottom line is a lot of it's basically work for welfare. And that's not serving anybody very well at all. We have the resources. We have lots of ability and lots of people who want to work. We just got to give them the means to do it. And that could help bring down the cost of living, whether it's food or anything else as well. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Trudeau's close associate in cabinet, says she didn't know that Kiev embassy staff faced a threat from Russia. This is the second story. And speaking of documentaries, Linda Slobodian's one called Abandoned. Look that up on the Western Standard site. It's 40 minutes. It's fantastic. Canadians screwed their allies, their friends, their translators, their cooks, all the people who trusted them in the Canadian embassy in Afghanistan. We screwed them. We left them hanging. The ambassador ran out of there with his tail between his legs, almost criminally, with not even full planes, bailing out when the Taliban took over. Well, we did the same thing in Ukraine. And Joly, I didn't know there was going to be a threat from the Russians when they came in. Really? Man, you're a brilliant foreign affairs minister. But we've got to remember, Trudeau picks his cabinet. I've talked about that before. Look at them. They're idiots. I've never seen such a dumb cabinet in my life. From Reagan to Climate Barbie to Melanie Joly. But there's a couple of reasons. For one, Trudeau's insecure about his own idiocy, and I can understand that. He's a twit. So he doesn't like being surrounded by people using words too big for him. So he keeps his cabinet stacked with people down on his level. They can all share crayons. But unfortunately, they're in positions of power. And Joly, well, she's also in there probably for some other assets she provides him. But for her to sit there and vacuously say she didn't understand that the embassy staff would be threatened, this is a repeat of what happened in Afghanistan. They bailed out. There's a hostile army coming in. And then, we didn't realize they were going to be in trouble in the embassy once we left them behind. Yeah, you're a real competent, trustworthy foreign minister. We're really thrilling the world with our good behavior and our smart leadership. All right, I'll leave off on that note, guys. I got another good show coming tomorrow. Again, more ranting. A couple of guests. I got Mark Milkey. He's been on a number of times. He's an author and writer, and he's got some columns out, as well as Jonathan Bradley. He's the Western Standard's local young man. We're going to talk to him about some of the stuff he's been writing and investigating into. And we'll see what else has got me pissed off, and I'll start ranting about that as well. So thanks for all joining me today, guys, and I will see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.